We're going to turn our attention now to a trial that is going on in the state of Massachusetts. 32-year-old mother, Lindsay Clancy, is charged with the murders of her three young children, and very disturbing details. She was also working at the time as a nurse in a delivery room in one of the hospitals, and now she allegedly used exercise bands to kill the children and then jumped out a second-story window in an apparent suicide attempt. She survived. She's currently paralyzed from the waist down. And we're bringing in right now a civil litigation attorney, Reagan Charleston Thomas, and to talk about this case. Reagan, thank you so much for making time to talk with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is just a devastating case.
It really is, and
Tragic.
it raises so many questions. But what are some of the issues that stand out to you?
Well, I mean, one, I have to say I'm a mother and I have two small children, and this is some very heavy subject matter that we're covering. And Lindsay Clancy has been accused of murdering her three children using an exercise band in her home in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and then attempting to commit suicide, jumping out of the second story window of the bedroom, and also cutting her wrists and neck. And the defense and Miss Clancy's team is not disputing that she killed or committed the acts that ultimately took the lives of her children, but they are saying that she lacked criminal responsibility. And so the Commonwealth is seeking to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was criminally responsible, i.e., that she could appreciate the criminality of the wrongfulness of her conduct and understand at the time essentially what she was doing, that it was breaking the law, appreciate her behavior. And her defense essentially is that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis and could not be found guilty by lack of criminal responsibility.
Okay, but and then also, I mean, the ages. I'm just looking here at the ages of the children: 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Kaylin.
Eight
I mean,
months.
these are small little children, and practically a newborn baby, and to be able to do that. What about the amount of drugs that she was given? Because there was testimony about that. There's a list, like a long list of these antipsychotic drugs and all of these other types of, some of the like Xanax, some of the common ones that people know about, that type of thing. What about the role of drugs as, having this psychosis, the psychotic behavior as a result of these drugs? How credible is that?
Well, we've heard from Miss Clancy's treaters over the last few days, and this has been some really impactful testimony. And I think that Miss Clancy's attorney, Kevin Reddington, has done an excellent job on cross examination. As you referenced, Miss Clancy was on a long list of prescription medications and antipsychotic drugs. She was on Lamictal, Xanax, sleeping meds. She was in and out of facilities trying to seek treatment for what she believed was severe depression and mental illness. And, that's part of the defense is that Lindsay Clancy was seeking help and she received, based on, the testimony, really poor medical care. And, I've said this before and I'll say it again, her treaters failed her. And I think that that was abundantly clear from the testimony that was offered on the stand, that she was seeing telehealth doctors and there was no real cooperation or coordination amongst her treaters. And it's devastating, and maternal care is already in such a terrible state across our country, but seeing it play out in this tragic case is very difficult to watch.
No, it's horrifying. And then, part of the trial, part of the evidence was she sent her then husband out to run and do errands, and that was supposed to show some of the premeditation. And then other people are saying, well, this is putting this whole diagnosis of postpartum depression, which I think a lot of the mental health providers and experts say is definitely a serious issue that can be treated, but it's a serious condition for the women who are experiencing this after giving birth. Is this going to have an impact on how we look at that?
I certainly hope this has an impact. I mean, if there's one thing we can take from the Lindsay Clancy case is that maternal health care has to be prioritized. Postpartum psychosis is a very real medical condition. Postpartum depression is obviously something you hear a little bit more about, but there's no question that Lindsay Clancy was failed by those around her at this time. You can look at her search history that came up today. She was noting in her diaries that she was not in control, in control of her mental state. She wanted to get better. She loved her children, and the entries in her journals are just devastating. She was constantly referencing her children and their welfare and trying to get better.
Yeah, and it's just it's heartbreaking. It's so disturbing to think about, and what kind of hell now she must be living in without those children, knowing that those children are gone because of her actions. I mean, the mother guilt is such a huge thing. You want to make sure they eat right. You want to make sure they're safe. You want to make sure they have everything that these little babies and these little children need. It's just got to be like a living hell for her right now.
A constant living hell. I can't imagine it. And they had to pause court and escort the jurors out of the room yesterday because Miss Clancy broke down during the autopsy testimony that was being offered. And I can't imagine sitting there as she is now, having to see this evidence and hear about this evidence and see the final pictures of her children. And there's a lot of conspiracy circulating online about her husband's involvement, and it's a very complex and fascinating case. And I work in the civil litigation field. I represent victims of crime and civil cases, but as a litigator, this fascinates me. Kevin Reddington's doing an excellent job, and he's very compassionate with his client. And as you mentioned, I can't imagine how it must be to sit here in trial and see your little children and hear about their final moments.
No, it's got to be horrible. What about also too? There's always been some very I'll just say active discussion. Some people might say controversy about these antipsychotic drugs and some of the drugs that were involved that she was prescribed by this, which is mind-boggling that they were that many would be prescribed, and that she obviously, like you said, was trying to get help. She was going to these healthcare providers or doctors, whoever, and getting all of these different prescriptions. Do you think these drugs are going to come under more scrutiny just as a byproduct of this?
I would certainly hope that that's part of the outcome and results from this trial and the attention that's focused on it. And she was prescribed to so many different medications. And like I said, her medical treaters were not coordinating their notes. I mean, Dr. Tufts was on the stand, and her notes were incomplete. And she didn't have a full picture of Miss Clancy's treatment history. She'd never seen postpartum psychosis before. And so it's just really devastating to see how this woman was failed by her caregivers and her medical team. It's a shame. And I know that from Patrick Clancy's perspective, um, I think that its husbands should be paying close attention to if their wives are at home suffering from any kind of mental distress in the wake of having a child. They should be doing all that they can to get their wives and the mothers of their children help.
No, and hopefully after all of this is, as a result of this, there'll be greater awareness, as you said, of the need for better maternal health care for all women in our society, and a recognition, just of how critical it is and how important it is, and more of a priority. Let's just say it like it is.
It has to be a priority. And that's something that, looking at this from a 30,000-foot view, just to see that this isn't a one-off. It didn't just happen with no warning.
Right.
She was screaming and crying for help, begging for help, and she didn't get it. And as a result, there are three children who lost their lives. And I think that this is such a devastating story and chain of events that's transpired that people simply cannot wrap their minds
Right.
around it. And like I said, there's a lot of controversy and conspiracy stirring online about her husband's involvement. And I think that goes to the fact that It's just simply unbelievable, that a mother could do this to her children. But the mental health aspect is tremendous. And as a society, we have to do more to take care of our mothers after they give birth.
No, absolutely. I agree with you 1,000% on that. But Reagan, thank you so much for making time for us. We really appreciate it and look forward to having you back on again. Thank you so much.